Welcome back to Real Life Stories, where we dive deep into the most compelling and emotional narratives that touch our lives. Today, we bring you a gripping tale that will leave you on the edge of your seat. Imagine waking up one day to discover that the person you trusted the most, your spouse, was cheating on you with your best friend. This shocking revelation shattered the world of our protagonist, unraveling a tale of betrayal, heartache, and ultimately redemption. But before we dive into this emotional story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on all our real-life dramas. You won't want to miss a single episode of the raw emotions and inspiring journeys we bring to you each week. Now, let's dive into the story of love, loss, and the power of forgiveness that will leave you breathless. I was shocked when I found out who my wife was cheating on me with. My best friend. The day I found out who my wife was cheating on me with was one of those mundane, uneventful days I thought I'd never forget. I woke up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of her laughter coming from the kitchen. It was the same laughter I had heard 1,000 times before, but something about it felt different that morning. There was an edge to it, a hint of excitement that made my stomach churn. I took a quick shower, threw on some clothes, and made my way downstairs. As I entered the kitchen, she was standing at the counter, her back to me, chatting animatedly with someone on the phone. I could only make out fragments of their conversation. The dress, flowers, so beautiful. My heart sank as I realized who she was talking to. It was him, the man I had seen her with so many times before. The man who had become such a large part of her life. The man who was supposed to be my best friend. How could I have been so blind? I cleared my throat, hoping to get her attention. She didn't seem to hear me at first, but finally she turned around, her face flushed and her eyes widened with surprise. "Oh, hi honey," she said, her voice betraying her nervousness. "I didn't hear you come in." I couldn't bring myself to speak. The rage and hurt coursing through me were too intense. I felt like my entire world was crashing down around me. She noticed my silence, and her demeanor changed, becoming more defensive. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice quivering. "Did you need something?" I forced myself to take a deep breath and compose myself before I responded. "Yes," I said slowly. I needed to know why. Her eyes widened further, and she took a step back, as if she were preparing for a blow. "Why him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why him and not me?" She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she began to tremble. I felt a pang of guilt for hurting her like that, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal that was so much stronger. "Please," she finally managed to choke out. "I can't explain." I turned away from her, unable to bear the sight of her pain any longer. "There's nothing to explain," I said, my voice steady despite my own turmoil. "The only thing I want to hear is that it's over, that you will end it and you'll come home." She let out a small, anguished cry and covered her face with her hands. I could hear her sobbing quietly, the sound like a knife slowly being twisted in my chest. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke. "I can't do that," she whispered. "I can't just leave him like that. He needs me." I spun around, my anger flaring anew. "Needs you?" I repeated. "You mean the same way you needed me?" I couldn't believe what she was saying. "You've thrown away everything we had together, and now you're telling me he needs you?" She lowered her hands from her face, her eyes red and puffy. "It's not like that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean it like that." Took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "It's just, I care about him. We've been through so much together. We are a family." I felt a surge of anger rise up inside me, threatening to consume me. "A family," I repeated, incredulous. "You mean more of a family than the one we had? The one we built together?" I couldn't believe she could even say those words. "Well, I guess I'm just disposable then." She winced at my words but didn't back down. "No, that's not what I meant," she insisted. "You're my husband, my best friend, but I can't just abandon him like that. He's been through so much. He needs me." I felt like I was being stabbed in the heart with every word she spoke. "So what about me?" I asked, my voice choking with emotion. "What about everything we've been through? Do I mean any less to you?" She hesitated, her eyes darting back and forth between me and the floor. "It's not like that," she finally said. "I love you. I do. But it's complicated." "Complicated," I repeated, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. "You mean because you've been lying to me for months? Because you've been sharing your bed with someone else?" Her face flushed and she looked away. "It's not like that," she stammered. "It's just, we've been through so much together. We've been through wars and revolutions, and we've been always there for each other. I can't just walk away from that." I felt a pang of pain in my chest as I listened to her words. She was right. We had been through a lot together. We had fought side by side, shared our deepest secrets, and held each other through the darkest nights. But somehow, in the midst of all that, she had found someone else. Someone who had taken my place in her heart. "Then you're choosing him over me," I said, my voice cold and empty. "Because that's what you're doing. You're choosing him." I took a step back, trying to steady my breath, and I can't compete with that. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears once more. "I don't want you to choose," she whispered. "I just need some time. I don't want you to choose. I just need some time." I closed my eyes, feeling a tightness in my chest. I knew she was asking the impossible. How could I give her time when every moment apart from her felt like a knife twisting in my heart? But I also knew that I couldn't force her hand. If she truly loved me, she would come back, eventually. I turned away from her, my shoulders slumping as I let out a long, shaky breath. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt so empty, so alone. I walked over to the window and stared out into the night, watching the stars twinkle in the sky. In that moment, it felt as though the entire universe was against me. "I need some time too," I finally said, my voice barely audible, "to figure out who I am without you." Her eyes widened and she opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "I'm not asking for forever," I said, my voice steadying. "Just give me some time, and maybe, when you have it all figured out, you can come find me." I turned back to her, my expression softening. "But I want you to know that, no matter what, I'll always love you. I'll always be here for you. You need me." She nodded, sniffling back tears. "I know," she whispered, "and I'll always love you too." But as the words left her lips, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread settle in my stomach, because I knew that love wasn't enough. Not anymore. We had been through so much together, seen too much pain and suffering to simply brush aside the feelings we had for each other. I watched her as she wiped away her tears, trying to compose herself. She looked so small and vulnerable, like the one I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But she was no longer that girl. She was someone else now. Someone who had been changed by the world around her. "I'll be back," she promised, her voice barely audible. "I swear it." I nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "Take all the time you need," I managed to say, my voice cracking. "Just don't forget about me." She smiled weakly, reaching out to touch my cheek. "I could never forget you, my love. You're a part of me, and always will be." Her fingers traced the outline of my jaw, and for a brief moment, I felt the familiar warmth of her touch. But then, she pulled her hand away and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts on my shattered heart. The days that followed were a blur of emptiness and despair. I tried to distract myself with work and hobbies, but her face would always find its way back into my thoughts. I would wonder about her whereabouts, if she was happy, if she was thinking about me. It was a constant struggle not to lose myself in the pain. One afternoon, as I was walking through the garden, I spotted her sitting beneath a weeping willow tree. Her head was bowed and her shoulders shook as she cried. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I should approach her, but something inside me pushed me forward. I took a deep breath and slowly made my way over to her. She looked up at me as I sat down beside her, her red-rimmed eyes meeting mine. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for any of this to happen." I reached out, taking her hand in mine. It was cold and clammy, a stark contrast to the warmth I remembered. "I know you didn't," I said gently, "but we are here now and we have to figure out what to do." She sniffled and wiped her nose on her sleeve. "I'm so scared," she confessed. "I don't know if I can ever forgive myself for what happened." I squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You have to try," I said. "You have to find it in yourself to forgive yourself, just as I have to find a way to forgive you. We can't move forward unless we can learn to accept what's happened and find a way to make peace with it." She looked away, her shoulders slumping. "But what if I can't? What if I'm not strong enough?" I squeezed her hand again. "Then we'll find someone who can help us. Someone who's been through something similar and can show us the way. We'll get through this together, I promise." She looked at me with a mixture of hope and fear, and for a moment, I could see the woman I had fallen in love with shining through. "You really believe that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled gently and squeezed her hand. "I do. I believe that together we can find our way back to each other. We can find a way to make things right." As the days went by, we began to seek out counselors and support groups to help us navigate through our grief and guilt. It wasn't easy, and there were many times when we wanted to give up, but we held on to each other, finding solace in the small gestures of understanding and affection that only the two of us seemed to share. The counselors we spoke with reminded us that forgiveness was not a one-time event, but rather a journey. They encouraged us to be patient with ourselves and with each other and to focus on the process rather than the end result. As we worked through our emotions, we began to see that our love for each other was stronger than the pain and suffering we had endured. One day, as we were walking through the garden, I took her hand in mine and looked into her eyes. There was a newfound depth there, a resilience that had not been there before. "I forgive you," I said simply. "I forgive you for everything." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "And I forgive you too," she whispered. "I forgive you because I love you, and I want us to be together." As we continued walking through the garden, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The air around us seemed lighter, more hopeful. We didn't say much, but our hands never left each other's, as we took comfort in the silent understanding that had grown between us. The healing process was long and arduous, but with each passing day we found ourselves able to confront our past head-on. We talked openly about our fears and doubts, our regrets and our guilt. We cried together, laughed together, and slowly, steadily, we began to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. We rediscovered the things we loved about each other. The way she could make me laugh with her quirky sense of humor. The way I could make her feel safe and protected when she was with me. We found solace in our shared interests, like exploring new restaurants or spending lazy afternoons reading in the park. The world around us seemed to take notice of our renewed bond. Friends and family who had once been uncertain about our future now watched us with a mix of admiration and envy. They saw the strength and resilience that had grown between us, and they knew that our love had survived the most terrible of ordeals. We still faced challenges, of course. There were days when the memories would be too much for us to bear, when the weight of our guilt would threaten to consume us once more. But we had learned how to support each other through those times, how to be there for each other when the world seemed darkest. As we come to the end of this heart-moving journey, we are reminded of the resilience of the human spirit and the power of love to overcome even the greatest of challenges. Our protagonist faced the ultimate betrayal but found the strength within themselves to forgive and rebuild. If you've been moved by this story, don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts and experiences, and of course, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends to spread the message of hope and forgiveness. Remember to subscribe to real-life stories for more riveting tales that will tug at your heartstrings and inspire you to embrace the journey of life. Until next time, stay strong, stay compassionate, and never underestimate the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Thank you for joining us.